It is I, Tantus Nav Van Jacobin, Lord and Emperor of the Jacobin Empire, and welcome. It's time for me to continue reviewing anime series, and then telling you some information, some suggestions on how you can use them in your BESM games, your Big Eyes Small Mouth game. Of course, a lot of this information can pertain to building them into other role-playing game systems. But for now, let's talk about it. I have two more from this season of Winter 2017 and a few more back from 2015. Let's start with the ones from this season, Gabriel Dropout and Handshakers. We'll start with Gabriel Dropout. Now, Gabriel Dropout focuses on this world where there are angels, and they basically go to their own kind of school, and upon graduation of the school, are sent down to the human world to learn more about humanity, and better how to basically guide them properly, by basically living amongst them at some of their schools. We meet Gabriel, who was the top of her class in angel school. She heads down to Earth and originally tries to be the model human student, basically blending in. And then she discovers video games. And she basically becomes a little bit of a shut-in, basically obsessed with video games, not caring about humanity ever anymore. And so it's her misadventures as being this sort of video game kind of nerd, kind of a little bit of a shut-in, and the other angels and devils that are around her that influence on her, and the basically funny situations a lot of them get into. So of course, when I call these genres, it's a comedy. It's got really good funny moments. I do recommend it. It's kind of silly. The characters are interesting. None of them quite fit the stereotype of angel or devil. They always have some kind of weird quirk to them that makes them unique. Of course, it is supernatural. They have powers. They are angels and devils. And of course, they have abilities and powers. I also call it a school, because it really focuses around their school life. We have a little bit of like Gabriel's home life and stuff, but it really focuses on that school life more than everything. I rate this one a 4. It's not perfection, but I really liked the comedy in it, and it was really entertaining to check out, so I definitely would recommend it. Now, if you're using this in a BESM game, I'd recommend 400 points. You're going to make your characters basically either angels or devils that have sent to Earth to basically learn about humanity and basically graduate themselves as top-of-the-line angels or devils in order to do their jobs properly when they basically return to their respective areas. They're going to be generally bad at it or basically have unique traits that make them interesting and maybe not the best examples of either of those. That's the point of it. And they're going to be living their normal lives, and silly things are going to happen between their interactions with NPCs, which might be either just humans or other angels or devils, and the interactions they have with each other, as they sort of have their own sort of bonding together, that they kind of get together as a group generally, but only because of their associations with each other, and the interest between it. You could have someone definitely like Gabriel, who's a more dropout, not caring characters. Or some of the other characters, they're all very unique and interesting, and definitely I'd recommend you could either mimic one of them, or come up with something on your own. It's definitely a fun one to play with. So the other one from this season is, of course, Handshakers. We focus on this sort of near future in Osaka, like an AD 20XX, where we focus on Tazuna, this character who's mechanically inclined high school student, who basically ends up going to this college to help out. He's a volunteer to do all kinds of mechanical work because he's kind of the expert in the local area. People rely on him for doing all this crazy mechanical things. There he runs into this girl that's unconscious, who reminds him of his sister. He basically eventually takes her hand, and they find themselves effectively teleported to this realm called Ziggurat, where they learn that they are handshakers, that they have this power that they can use together, this Nimrod as they call it. Of course, it's learned that this girl effectively has some kind of problem that she can't survive, and the link between them is what's keeping her alive now. She was in some kind of like stasis up until then. But this also means that he's got to hold her hand a lot. So very interesting situations when she's basically got to sort of be with him in the normal side of life occur. But then they have to deal with, of course, other handshakers and the entire purpose of them, which is to confront effectively this god. So as for the genres, I call it an action. They get into battles with other handshakers and other things as they explore the Ziggurat and use and master their Nimrod. It's a little bit of a sci-fi. It's like a other dimensional level and weird. It seems very sci-fi related powers. It definitely has that feel to it, that there's a technology level to it, rather than more like mystical science fiction, mystical supernaturally. And I call it a bit of a school, because it does revolve around their school life. A lot of the interesting situations, which are a little bit more comedy, it's not really a comedy, it's got a little bit of it, do occur on the school side of things because of the relationship they sort of have between the two. He has to tend to hold her hand most of the time in order for her not to die. They do increase the amount of time that they can be apart, but it's a, process. They still have to have that contact very often. Now, I rate this one a 3. It was an interesting series with an interesting concept for characters, and it does have its good moments, but it didn't draw me in nearly as, perfectly. And that's why it's just a 3. Now, if you're using this in a Bessem game, I recommend 450 points. So you're going to make your characters handshakers. Now, you can either go one of two ways. You can either pair off your players, in which then I would recommend even players. Or you could each player have an NPC associated with them, and then they're all separate handshaker teams. You could come up with something in the middle of this too if you really wanted to. But they contend with the fact that they're supposed to defeat this god. They might do a little bit of rivalry between each other, but generally speaking, they'll be working together pretty decently. They might deal with other handshakers out there, which are kind of threats, and kind of work out dealing with them. But it's all about this balance out with them traveling to Ziggurat and dealing with whatever's going on there, and balancing out some of that normal life there. You could have connections similar to what Tazuna has to Hoyori, the girl that he met, or you could come up with something else entirely that kind of gives these weird bonds, which could come up with little jovial moments that they'd have on the school side, but just enough to keep it from getting too tense on all the other sides. You don't want to make it a comedy. You might want some little silly things in there to break some tension at times, because this is not a hugely tense game or world. Now let's move on to the 2 from back in 2015. I've got Absolute Duo and Dog Days. Let's start with Absolute Duo. So we have our main character, Tor. He enrolls in Kurio Academy, this place that's basically training the next level of security operatives to defend the world. They battle with this ability called Blaze. The entrance examination is basically they pair off everybody and have you defeat that pair. Half of them get into the academy. During the process of this, Tor manifests not a melee weapon, which the majority of Blazes are. He manifests a shield, a defensive item. So he becomes a unique among them, that there are very few that have unique abilities like him. He does pass the exam and gets into the academy, where he's eventually paired with this girl, Julia. They go off in pairs in amongst the groups here in order to sort of function these bonded pairs. The two of them eventually learn that they have similar reasons for joining here, this idealism of revenge against somebody from their pasts. And so the two of them bond over this and become a very powerful pair, leading onto the various adventures that they go on. Also, basically getting along with some of the other pairs at the school and going against some of the enemies that exist out in the world. Each of them still seeking out that revenge that they have. Now, it's definitely a fantasy. They have this sort of fanciful power that they can summon these weapons that they have attacks with and abilities with. So it definitely feels this fantasy item. It has a definitely romance feel. Tor and Julia definitely get this kind of romantic vibe between them. They're forced to live together, and they kind of bond over their sort of shared hatred over the course of the series that kind of leads to this romantic situation between them. Kind of interesting that way. It's also, I'd call it an action. They get into battles with other duos to basically train, to have different situations where they have to fight. So there's definitely lots of action throughout it. Now, I rated a 4. It's actually a pretty great series. It's pretty interesting, got an interesting concept, and it was pretty fun to watch. Now, if you're using this Bessem game, I'd recommend 400 points. Your characters will be Blazes, the people that use these powers. They're going to be basically set up in duos within the academy. Now, this could be basically you have even number of players, you duo them up, or similar to the last one I was talking about, if you want to use NPCs for duos, you can. I would highly recommend you try to keep 2 players as much as possible with this one. It does reduce the number of stress you have in this case, and also because each of them is going to have their own unique power, rather than working together for a single power, like I was talking about with Handshakers. This one, each of them will have their own. They're going to work as their pairs, basically go through harsh training, various obstacles to get better at the school, maybe go through tournaments and competitions to get better, deal with others the pair duos that are out there, maybe make friends with other ones. They definitely, in between their groups of pairs, either if there's a single pair or maybe a couple pairs that you have that you're playing with, they'll bond with each other and basically become teammates in a way that they will be willing to work with each other. While you deal with maybe some of the backstories of your characters, that they should have something that's easy to bring in and make them good reason behind joining this as becoming a blaze in the first place, training to use these weapons and fight with them. Good reasons will drive a good story, in this case similar to Tor and Julia's backstories, driving them in. Regardless, you're going to deal with the fact they're going to compete all times with other students, and maybe even some of these threats from the outside beyond the Academy's walls that are trying to change things or influence things in their own way. Now let's talk about Dog Days. We focus on Shin. He's this happy-go-lucky athletic boy that loves these kind of competition games, and he ends up getting sucked into this alternate dimension of Flonyard. The difference between the humans of Flonyard and the humans of our world is each of them has animal ears and tail. He's effectively summoned by the princess of this kingdom, Biscotti, Melchior, to be their hero. They basically have changed war to this almost competition game where no one really gets injured, where they kind of battle it out between these two kingdoms for various things. It's a game almost now. So he easily gets into this game. He wouldn't have participated in an actual war, but the way that they do things here interests him and it draws him in. So he becomes this sort of hero, mainly against the feline Galette lion, which has been sort of beating down Biscotti at this point in time, and helping them basically become a force to reckon with. This is over the course of 3 series. Now, each of these series we see that Shin basically returns to this realm after they find a way to basically have him go back and forth. He also brings in some of his other friends and other people who become heroes of the respective different kingdoms, and we see the expansion of the basically world they're going into, meeting other interesting characters, seeing new threats that some of these kingdoms then have to work together to overcome, more than just the friendly competitions which still occur between the kingdoms. Less stakes, and basically balancing out things better and better. Now, this, of course, is an action series. There's plenty of little battles it out. You have the kind of more general characters which kind of just battle it out with each other, while you have a lot of the throwaway minions kind of getting beat up all around the place. It's adventure. Shin, when in between these kind of battles, travels to interesting places to discover the kingdom, meets new people, learns new things, loves to explore and go on interesting little adventures himself. It's very so much a fantasy. They have like this kind of mixture of a kind of technology that would be similar to ours, but they have this very magic-based feel to it. So it's kind of like a science fantasy almost a little bit, but I feel like it leans a lot more towards the fantasy, that they have very magic-based powers almost all the time. Now, I rate this one a 3. It's an interesting series, but there was just certain components of the way it was put out that did draw me away from it a little bit, but I did have fun watching it at very least. Now, if you're going to use this in a Bessem game, I'd recommend 350 points. You're going to make all your characters a hero of Flonyard. They're each going to have a kingdom for them that they're going to be a hero of. And once they're these heroes, they're, of course, maybe going to compete with each other. They could also work together for various things. The kingdoms have their own competitions amongst each other, which tend to be friendly, kind of rivalries and things like that. And then you have the much larger things that might occur. Common enemy, or perhaps something like a demon awakening that they have to fight against, then the heroes and the armies have to work together. But it's all in the backdrop of this friendly kind of competition battle that you're not going for like killing each other. You're going for defeating each other, and usually going very competition oriented. So it makes it a very interesting juxtaposition that it kind of has friendly war almost, you could call it. And of course, your players, being the heroes, are going to be the forefront of this. The basically champions leading the way into battle in these events. So that's it for today. I introduced you to 4 more series, 4 more animes that I gave you a review of, and then I gave you some suggestions on how you can use them in your Bessem games. Now, this isn't to say, of course, as I said before, you could use these in another type of role-playing game system. They can be adapted. Some of these things are a little more harder to adapt than others, but it's up to you how you wish to adapt them, how you wish to put them together. It's just the settings themselves are interesting for using in role-playing games. But regardless, if you have any questions, comments, anything you would say, anything you think I left out, please leave in the comments below. Please like, share, and subscribe. It shows you for the channel, the empire, the work I do. If you want to show some extra support, you can always check out my Patreon. link description below. But regardless, until the next time, I bid you farewell.